Hey there, all you beautiful Broadway babies! Welcome back to Broadway by Ghostlight. I'm Mark Bonanni, and this is episode 58 of Broadway Jeopardy! If you love Broadway history and musical theater trivia, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. I've got 26 all-new clues ready to test your musical-loving minds, so without further ado, let's get right into this week's game. This is Broadway Jeopardy! Looking at the categories for this week's game, we start off, as always, with last week's Final Jeopardy category, which is one-woman shows. Looking at some one-woman evenings of theater. That's followed by synonym titles. In this fun wordplay category, I'm going to give you a title of a show with every word swapped for a synonym word or phrase, and you name the original title. For example, hilarious woman would be funny girl. After that, we have the Jimmy Awards. Known as the Teenage Tonys, the Jimmy Awards focuses on high school musical theater on a national level, and in this category we're going to be looking at some of its illustrious finalists throughout the years. Thank you to player Renee for that suggestion. Next up we have 1959, heading back to Broadway's golden age and looking at shows that opened in the year 1959, a landmark year for the American musical theater. And last but not least, we have Page to Stage, a returning category looking at some musicals based on books or novels. And we end with the Final Jeopardy category, so make sure and keep track of your scores if you want to play along, so you can wager some or all of your imaginary earnings on that final clue. We start off, of course, with the $200 round, or the overture round as we call it here, where the questions should be on the easier side to help you get a leg up on the game before I lovingly knock you down with the harder questions later on. Kicking things off in the one-woman shows category, your first $200 clue is... This legendary Broadway broad demanded everybody rise at her one-woman show titled At Liberty. Who is Elaine Stritch? Elaine Stritch at Liberty opened at the Neil Simon Theater in 2002, a spectacular show with heart, pathos, and huge laughs. Luckily for all of us, not only did the one-woman opus get a 2-disc recording, remember CDs? But it also got a pro shot, which if you haven't seen it, you have to. It's incredible.
Even with a turkey that you know will fold, you may be stranded out in the cold. Still, you wouldn't trade it for a sack of gold. Try me.
Moving on to the synonym titles category, name the original title represented by the $200 clue. Nice guys favor yellow hair. What is Gentlemen Prefer Blondes? Heading to the Jimmy Awards category now with the $200 clue. 2018 Jimmy Award winner Renee Rapp made her Broadway debut as Regina George in this musical. What is Mean Girls? So I'm going to attempt to briefly explain how the Jimmy Awards work. To be a finalist at the Jimmy Awards, high school students who have appeared in a significant role in their school's musical production are eligible in one of 51 different regional competitions. 2 performers from each region are then selected, the Best Actor and Best Actress, and they automatically become Jimmy nominees. Then all of the Jimmy nominees head to New York City, where they appear at a ceremony in a Broadway theater hosted by a celebrity. And in the first act, all the nominees present usually medleys where they do snippets of their winning roles in school productions. During intermission of the Jimmy Awards, the finalists are chosen, typically 4 boys and 4 girls. I'm not sure how they handle non-binary performers, but I don't know. But then these finalists perform full solos, and then 1 actor and 1 actress are ultimately chosen as the winners of the Jimmy Awards. All that being said, here's a snippet of Renee Rapp's finalist performance of All Falls Down from the musical Chaplin.
And all the king's horses and all the king's men will never put poor Charlie together again. And what you gonna do when it all falls down?
Let's get in our time machines and go to 1959 with the $200 clue. In the landmark musical Gypsy, Act 1 ends with our leading lady belting out that everything's coming up these. What are roses? There's a great story that goes along with the title of that song. The phrase "everything's coming up roses" has been somewhat integrated into the cultural zeitgeist to mean things are going well, but it was invented by Stephen Sondheim for the original production of Gypsy. When the song was sung for the first time in rehearsals by star Ethel Merman, it was electric, but the musical's director, Jerome Robbins, looked a little perplexed. "What's the problem?" asked Sondheim. Robbins, assuming that the title had to do with the person singing it, the character of Rose, replied, "Well, I just don't understand. Everything's coming up roses what?" I love that story. And finishing up the overture round in the page to stage category, your final $200 clue is: Richard Burton starred as King Arthur in this Lerner and Loewe musical, based on the novel The Once and Future King by T.H. White. What is Camelot? If it wasn't for Richard Burton, the musical Camelot may never have come to Broadway. The creation, rehearsal process, and tryouts for Camelot were rocky, to say the least. After the huge success of My Fair Lady, that show's creative team, including the writers Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Loewe and director Moss Hart, followed it up with the musical retelling of the King Arthur legend. But the immense pressure of following up a smash hit got to everyone, with Lerner being hospitalized for bleeding ulcers at one point and Moss Hart having his second heart attack during the process. Frederick Loewe and Alan J. Lerner both separately stated that if it wasn't for the show's leading man, Richard Burton, who steered the ship, keeping everything running as smooth as possible and leading the company with a quiet and comforting hand, the show probably would have closed on the road. I hope everything was coming up roses for you all in that first round. Let's move on to the only slightly harder $400 round now. Circling back to one-woman shows, your first $400 clue is: this beloved star of television shows like Hacks and Designing Women is currently back on Broadway in a one-woman play titled Call Me Izzy. Who is Jean Smart? Yes, Jean Smart is back on Broadway after an absence of 25 years, the last time being for the 2000 revival of The Man Who Came to Dinner alongside Nathan Lane. Call Me Izzy, currently at Studio 54, is a new one-woman drama written by Jamie Wax about a woman in an abusive marriage. Your next shot at a synonym title comes now with the $400 clue: The Maximum Ecstatic Gentleman. What is The Most Happy Fella? Back at the Jimmy Awards category, we have the $400 clue: 2013 Jimmy Award finalist Ava Noblezada was cast as Kim in the revival of this Bublé and Schonberg musical as a direct result of her Jimmy Awards performance. What is Miss Saigon? Created in 2009, the Jimmy Awards were inspired by the Gene Kelly Awards, which since 1991 have given out awards for high school performances in the Pittsburgh area. Van Kaplan, the head of the Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera, which produces the Gene Kelly Awards, pitched the idea of a national high school level musical theater award to the Nederlander organization, and they went with it, naming them the Jimmy Awards after James M. Nederlander, longtime head of the Nederlander organization. Here's a bit of Ava Noblezada's finalist performance of With You from the musical Ghost.
I keep thinking that you'll be calling, and everyone says that it's all in my head, and I can't accept it yet, and I'm not ready to just give in. I know that I can't live in this place with these feelings of regret.
Looking at a classic in the 1959 category with the $400 clue: in the original production of The Sound of Music, when the children are frightened of a storm, Maria distracts them with the musical tale of a lonely one of these. What is a goat herd? Yes, in the original Broadway production, A Lonely Goat Herd was sung in Act 1 when the children are frightened due to a thunderstorm. For the 1965 film, of course, the songs were reordered and My Favorite Things was sung by Maria and the Frightened Children. Subsequent professional productions of The Sound of Music are split, with some using the original song placement like in The Sound of Music Live in 2013, while others use the now more well-known film song placement like the 2006 London revival. And then there's the 1998 Broadway revival of The Sound of Music, which had My Favorite Things during the thunderstorm like in the film, but they moved Lonely Goat Herd to be performed by the Von Trapps at the Salzburg Music Festival towards the end of the show. Your final $400 clue in the page to stage category is the musical The Phantom of the Auditorium is based on the 24th book in this spooky kids book series by R.L. Stine. What is Goosebumps? As a young kid in the 90s, I was an avid Goosebumps reader, and The Phantom of the Auditorium was always one of my favorites. The stage adaptation of the kids' horror book, officially titled Goosebumps the Musical, Phantom of the Auditorium, premiered in 2016, written by John McClay and Danny Abosh. The show has since been performed regionally all throughout the country, and there is a studio cast recording as well, with several Broadway names appearing, including Alex Brightman and Sheryl Lee Ralph, and even a vocal cameo by R.L. Stine himself. Heading right into the $600 round now, back at One Woman Shows, your first $600 clue is comedy legend Lily Tomlin won the Best Actress Tony in 1986 for her one-woman show, The Search for This in the Universe. What are signs of intelligent life? Opening at the Plymouth Theater, now called the Schoenfeld Theater, in 1985, Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe was co-written and directed by Jane Wagner, Tomlin's longtime partner. The acclaimed play ran for a year and was filmed in 1991. Tomlin would bring back the show to Broadway in 2000 at the Booth Theater for a limited run, and in January of 2021, the play was revived off-Broadway, now starring SNL and Schmigadoon star Cecily Strong. The $600 clue in the synonyms title category is fantasy females. What is Dreamgirls? You guys enjoying this category? I think it's kind of fun. Taking the stage at the Jimmy Awards with the $600 clue. 2017 Jimmy Awards finalist Jasmine Amy Rogers recently starred as this cartoon icon who suddenly leaves her black and white world for the colorful real world. Who is Betty Boop? Can I just say, Jasmine Amy Rogers was so great in Boop. You know when older theater nerds describe seeing someone like Gwen Verdon or someone like that in the theater, and they just say they have this presence in a live performance, this magical extra quality that radiates from the stage. Jasmine Amy Rogers has that, and I cannot wait to see her back on the board soon. Here is a bit of her Jimmy Awards finalist performance of Easy as Life from Aida.
All I have to do is pretend I never knew him. On those very rare occasions when he steals into my heart. Better to have lost him when the ties were barely binding.
Let's look at a classic play in the 1959 category with the $600 clue. Anne Bancroft and Patty Duke starred in the original production of this classic play based on the life of Helen Keller. What is The Miracle Worker? The original Broadway production of The Miracle Worker opened on October 19th, 1959 at the Playhouse Theater, which no longer exists. Based on the 1903 autobiography of Helen Keller titled The Story of My Life, the play was written by William Gibson, author of Two for the Seesaw and Golda's Balcony, among others. As the clue stated, the play originally starred Anne Bancroft as Annie Sullivan and young Patty Duke as Helen Keller, both of which would repeat their performances on the big screen. Years later, in 1979, Patty Duke returned to the play, this time as Annie Sullivan, for a made-for-television movie version with Melissa Gilbert now as Helen. And opening up the page stage category gives us the $600 clue. This Andrew Lloyd Webber musical opens in Pau, France, as an older Alex reflects on the events of the past in the song Love Changes Everything. What is Aspects of Love? Based on the 1955 novel of the same name by David Garnett, Aspects of Love tells the story of an actress named Rose who has a passionate fling with a 17-year-old fan named Alex, but then she falls for his uncle and the two have a child who then starts a relationship with the grown-up Alex. I'll be very honest with you all, I don't know much about Aspects of Love. I do of course have many gaps in my theater knowledge, mostly involving British musicals, and Aspects of Love is definitely one of them. And honestly, it sounds problematic, let's say. I'm sure many of you have seen it before, and am I crazy? Is it weird? Let me know in the comments what you think, and maybe I'll have to check it out. It's time to crank up the difficulty level a few notches with the $800 round now. But before we do, if you're enjoying this week's game, please help me out by hitting that little like button for me. It really does go a long way to getting these videos shown to more fine folks like yourselves, but also makes me feel like I've just won a Jimmy Award. Which, for my finalist performance this year, I will be singing Purefoy's Lament from Drat the Cat.
Nope, 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 nope.
Thank you all, I really do appreciate it. Okay, let's get this show on the road with the $800 round. Looking at a recent entry in the one-woman show category with the $800 clue. Succession star Sarah Snook recently starred in a one-woman adaptation of this Gothic novel in the West End and Broadway. What is The Picture of Dorian Gray? The one-woman adaptation of the 1891 Gothic horror novel by Oscar Wilde was written by Kip Williams. In the show, Sarah Snook took on 26 different characters to tell the story of a man who exchanges his soul for eternal youth and beauty. This was all aided by the extensive use of screens and pre-recorded bits. Snook would win the Olivier Antony Awards for her efforts. The playwright William Kipp has announced a new adaptation of a famous Gothic novel which will utilize the same one-woman setup with the different screens and all that, same as he did with Dorian Gray. The new show will be an adaptation of Dracula and is set to star Cynthia Erivo, and I think that's pretty darn exciting. Doing a little wordplay with the synonym titles category in the $800 clue. Preservatives Final Impromptu Music Session. What is Jelly's Last Jam? I don't know, that synonym title just makes me laugh for some reason. The $800 clue in the Jimmy Awards category is, before starring as Marty McFly in Back to the Future on Broadway, 2019 Jimmy Award finalist Casey Likes starred in this musical based on the film by Cameron Crowe. What is Almost Famous? Casey Likes seemingly never stops working, and honestly, I'm not mad at it. Like the clue stated, he made his Broadway debut leading the company of Almost Famous. From there, he went directly into Back to the Future, where he stayed with the show for its entire 2-year run. And now he's back on the boards in New York, though off-Broadway this time, where he just opened in the revival of Heathers the Musical, where he's playing the role of homicidal love interest JD. Here is a bit of Casey Likes' finalist performance of Santa Fe from Newsies.
Far from the lousy headlines and the deadlines in between. Santa Fe, my old friend, I can't spend my whole life dreaming, though I know that's all I seem inclined to do.
Heading back 66 years again with the 1959 category brings us the $800 clue. Gwen Verdon and Richard Kiley both won the Tony Awards for this mystery musical, which itself won the 1959 award for Best Musical. What is Redhead? Redhead is a member of that small group of shows that won the Best Musical Tony Award but have since faded into obscurity. One major reason why this happened in the case of Redhead is that the show was tailor-made for Broadway superstar Gwen Verdon, and really, there's never been anyone else like her. And looking at a momentous debut in the Page to Stage category gives us the $800 clue. Liza Minnelli made her Tony Award-winning Broadway debut in this Candor and Ebb musical, based on the novel Love is Just Around the Corner by Lester Atwell. What is Flora the Red Menace? The 1965 musical follows Flora, a young artist during the Great Depression, who gets a job at a department store where she meets and falls for Harry, an active member of the Communist Party. Yeah, when they said the Red Menace, they meant the Red Menace. At just 19 years old, Liza Minnelli debuted on Broadway in the leading role of Flora and won her first Tony Award for Best Actress in a Musical for it. Not only was Flora the Red Menace Miss Minnelli's Broadway debut, but it was Kander and Ebb's as well. Both John Kander and Fred Ebb had had musicals they wrote for reach Broadway, but this was the first show from them as a team. We've reached that point, my friends. The big show, the main event. It's the $1,000 round. Let me hear that dramatic music. Best of luck, players. Circling back one last time to the one-woman show category with the $1,000 clue. The lightning-fast flop The Blonde and the Thunderbird starred this sitcom icon. Who is Suzanne Summers? The Blonde and the Thunderbird is one of those legendary flops that the few audience members who saw it wear it like a badge of honor. And when I say a few audience members, I mean a few. The one-woman show, which played the Brooks Atkinson Theater, ran for only 10 previews and 9 official performances. Adapted from 2 of Miss Summers' memoirs, the one-woman musical had her reenacting the wins and losses from her career. Critics absolutely ravaged the show, with words like embarrassing, excruciating, and tacky being bandied about. Critic David Rooney in Variety savagely wrote that Miss Summers promises the good, the bad, and the ugly, and she delivers. The good is the short runtime, and the bad is everything between the first entrance and the final bows. Yikes. Your last synonym title for $1,000 is Beside Common. What is next to normal? Looking at a more recent Jimmy Awards winner with the $1,000 clue, Justin Cooley, a 2021 Jimmy Awards finalist, made his Broadway debut in Kimberly Akimbo as Seth Wheatus, a sweet if awkward student who plays this brass instrument. What is the tuba is the right response. Yes, Seth Wheatus plays the tuba, which later in the show is stolen by Kimberly's Aunt Deborah, which Seth finds in Kimberly's basement. Here is some of Justin Cooley's 2021 Jimmy Awards finalist performance of Time from the musical Tuck Everlasting, which he had to perform virtually because, 2021.
There was a farmhouse with a grandfather clock, where one day I woke up alone. They feared I was magic, they feared I was cursed, but mostly they feared the unknown.
The $1,000 clue in the 1959 category is... In 1959, Jackie Gleason starred in this musical based on the Eugene O'Neill comedy Ah, Wilderness. What is Take Me Along? As the clue stated, Take Me Along was the musical adaptation of the Eugene O'Neill play Ah, Wilderness, a sentimental comedy which stands out among O'Neill's usual fare of heavy dramas like The Iceman Cometh and Long Day's Journey into Night. This was not the first time that Ah, Wilderness had been made into a musical, though. In 1948, the play was adapted into the movie musical Summer Holiday, starring Mickey Rooney and Gloria DeHaven. And the curtain call clue in the page to stage category for $1,000 is... This 1949 musical by Kurt Weill and Maxwell Anderson is based on the novel Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Paton. What is Lost in the Stars? Lost in the Stars opened on Broadway at the Music Box Theater on October 30th, 1949. The musical drama is about 2 South African families, one black and one white, who are brought together by a tragic murder charge in the age of apartheid. It originally starred Todd Duncan, the original Porgy in Porgy and Bess, and was directed by Ruben Mamoulian, who had directed the original production of Porgy and Bess as well as other musicals like Oklahoma and Carousel. Boasting a gorgeous score, Lost in the Stars would prove to be Kurt Weill's last musical, as the renowned composer would pass away a year later in 1950. Etched on the musical master's tombstone was a passage of music from Lost in the Stars, along with the accompanying lyrics from the song A Bird of Passage, which reads, "This is the life of men on earth, Out of darkness we come at birth, into a lamplit room, and then go forward into dark again. And now we've reached the final Jeopardy round, everyone. Time to tally up those scores and decide how much you want to wager in the category Kristen Chenoweth. The small but powerful Broadway diva is celebrating her birthday next Thursday, so we'll celebrate Miss Chenoweth with her own category. Okay, has everyone made their wagers? Liz? Sarah? Catherine? Okay, here is your final clue. Kristen Chenoweth made her Broadway debut in this 1997 musical, where she played the role of Precious McGuire. What is Steel Pier? Kander and Ebb's Steel Pier takes place on Atlantic City's famous Steel Pier during the Depression, where there's a grueling dance marathon with couples enduring torture-like conditions for a chance at money and fame. Miss Chenoweth's supporting role of Precious McGuire is a newlywed who starts the marathon with her loving husband Happy. But when Happy eventually wants to quit and go back home to Utah and enjoy being married, Precious abandons her husband, instead choosing to keep dancing with a new partner, aching for a chance at some fame. And that's this week's game! How did you all do this week? Were you a miracle worker, or was your brain lost in the stars? Be sure to let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you guys and seeing how you did. As always, a huge pile of love for my patrons over on Patreon. You guys are my favorites. If you want to help support the channel and keep the videos coming, you can check out my Patreon using the link in the video description, where there's also a link to my merch shop. And of course, another big way to help support me and Broadway Jeopardy is to share these videos all over social media. You can follow me outside of YouTube at Blue Sky or Instagram, or you can email me directly at broadwaybygghostlight@gmail.com. Be on the lookout for a new Broadway 101 video coming very soon about a most remarkable fella. And I will of course be back next week with episode 59 of Broadway Jeopardy. But until then, I'm Mark Benani. This is Broadway by Ghostlight. Thanks for playing.